My name is Felix Schrodinger, and I don't get jokes. I have a sense of humor, but I don't get jokes. Especially if someone is the victim of the joke, and especially if I'm the victim. And by the way, I have a cat. And like all cats, she likes to climb into crates, and actually into all sorts of containers and confined spaces. I have no idea why. It's just a cat thing. I think you may have heard of Schrodinger's cat, although you may be a little unsure of what that means. Schrodinger, the famous one, not me or my grandfather, was a physicist. He gave his name to a thought experiment in which he placed an imaginary cat in a box with a mechanism that may or may not have killed the cat, depending on a random subatomic event. We only find out if the cat is alive or dead by opening the box. Until then, the cat is alive and dead at the same time. How you interpret this mental experiment leads to deciding whether or not we live in a multiverse. So at least from a physics perspective, it's a pretty big deal. Joking often serves as a cover for aggression. By lashing out at the joker, you'll hear, "Don't you get jokes? I was just kidding." Have you lost your sense of humor? And many other variations on that theme. I worked hard at university because I knew my parents were struggling to help with my studies while other kids were having fun, and so I became the center of pranks from rich kids who saw my passion as a kind of coded criticism. This goes some way to explaining my allergy to April Fool's Day. So often it turns out to be extremely obnoxious. Someone tries too hard and is completely uninspired, commits a joke that on any other day would be taken as an invitation to get a punchline, but on this day they have a free pass. And if you object, it means you can't take a joke. Okay, and back to my story again. These days, you may well have heard of me, but at the time these events took place, I was a budding biotech entrepreneur. I was already successful enough to own my own house in a decent part of London. It was the first day of April, and a month earlier you could say everything was perfect. My friend Sarah had moved in with me, and my friends were saying she was perfect for me. I admit that I have a tendency to be a bit stressed out, trying to plan everything, and it's not easy for me to relax, but it's also one of the reasons why I had a house in London when I wasn't yet 30. They saw that Sarah was helping me not to take things too seriously. She was fun to be around. I worked pretty hard because there was an opportunity to do a big deal with a major pharmaceutical concern to provide them with important precursors for a whole range of drugs at a price that was less than normal. This was because we had come up with a different way of producing them. I knew that if we made a deal, I would be set for life, and I was the kind of guy who would only propose to his girlfriend when he was sure he could support her and the family he hoped to have. I had already bought the ring, but was procrastinating on the proposal. Unfortunately, Sarah didn't seem to appreciate it. Fun was important to her, and as far as she was concerned, I wasn't as fun as I used to be. And then her university friend Mark got kicked out of his apartment, and she insisted that we let him stay in the spare room, saying it would only be for a couple days. By the 1st of April, he had been there for 2 weeks and seemed quite comfortable. Which makes sense, since he hadn't paid rent and hadn't yet taken a course on loading and unloading the dishwasher. When he arrived, I didn't ask him for anything, as it was only supposed to be for a couple days. Oddly enough, although he annoyed me immensely, I didn't see him as a competitor in a romantic sense. No ambition whatsoever, immature, lacking in manners, uncultured, proud of his ignorance. I hope you get the picture. On top of that, Sarah assured me that they had never been in a relationship, and honestly, I'm pretty sure she wasn't lying. The deed was done. The contract was signed, dated Friday the 1st of April, and I could move forward with our plans. For the first time in a long time, I was leaving work at 4. I told my secretary, Gail, that I was leaving. She asked if I was heading home, which in retrospect was odd since she usually never asked me that, but I didn't pay any attention to it at the time. I had plans for the evening. I had plans, and they definitely didn't include Mark. He could spend his time watching pointless reality TV as usual. We're going to a fancy restaurant, and at some point, I'll pull out a little box, get down on one knee and ask a question. That's how I saw that evening. But as a famous German general said, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Items of intimate apparel in the hall and on the stairs, sounds coming from upstairs. Sarah's voice screamed in ecstasy. Mark grunted, then said, "Exactly, take it, slut." Sarah screamed, "Take me, Mark, take me." There were 11 steps, and each one seemed to be a meter high. I got to the top. and stood facing our bedroom door. All I had to do was reach out and open it. Fuck me, stud. I threw up, quietly and without warning, and suddenly I could think. I turned around and headed down the stairs. Strangely, it seemed to get quiet upstairs, though I was pretty sure they couldn't hear me. In the kitchen, I wrote a short note. When I get back, Mark had better leave, or his next accommodation will be a hospital room. You'll also need to find another place to live. I got out, got in my car, and drove to the Venus Bar. I parked, walked in, and ordered myself a Diet Coke. I only drink alcohol when I'm happy, but not when I need to think. The Venus Bar caters mostly to the dregs of humanity, or so it seems. Oddly enough, it's in a fairly posh part of London, but that doesn't do justice to the interior or the customers. That's why I go there when times are tough. It gives me perspective. After a few minutes, I started to see the positives. On some level, I already felt something wasn't right. That's why I didn't propose to her sooner. At least we weren't married yet. Oddly enough, the thing that angered me most at that moment was not the infidelity, not the disrespect, but the stupidity. Besides, I wondered what the hell she found in Mark. I know I looked at him through the eyes of a man, but I don't think he was particularly handsome. He didn't keep himself in shape like I did, despite my workload, and he certainly wasn't dapper, nor did he have any prospects. Those were my thoughts as I sat there. Then she walked into the bar. Gorgeous, dressed elegantly and sexy, high black heels. What I was almost certain of were stockings, not tights. Totally out of place at the Venus Bar, and I knew it. All those sneaky guys turned their heads like crocodiles on the riverbank, ready to slip into the water, grab a tempting calf, and drag it under. She put the phone to her ear and spoke venomously. A joke? A April Fool's prank? I can't believe you did this to me, knowing how I feel about it. I could see the tears coming. You'll be here in half an hour? What am I supposed to do now? I don't even have any money or cards, because you took them out of my wallet? Her voice became incredulous. Should I ask someone to buy me a drink? Here? At this point, she broke down and ended the conversation. Now she just stood there, not knowing what to do. I didn't realize I was about to intervene myself. I beg your pardon? She flinched. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, and I have a suggestion. She turned and looked at me with understandable suspicion. Then she did a sort of double take. You look kind of familiar. Have we met before? Now I was the one who was caught off guard, and I answered with spontaneous honesty. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I'd remember you. You're beautiful. She blushed slightly, and before she could respond, I added, I'm Felix Schrodinger. She smiled, and it was the most charming smile I'd ever seen. Wow, I see. I saw your picture today. You're the owner of Mendel's Garden, aren't you? My editor wanted me to find out if you got that huge contract everyone's talking about with Paradise Pharmaceuticals. I was amazed that I was getting so much attention. I'm April Fuller. I just started at the Financial Times, kind of on probation. I was glad she was at least open to talking to me. I was going to suggest you stop by the Regency Hotel bar next door. It's a little more decent than this one, and then you won't be here when he shows up. She smiled, but then got a little concerned. As you may have heard, I don't have any money with me. I laughed. Well, it just so happens that after signing a certain deal today, I can afford to have a couple drinks. April grinned and nodded. I turned to the bartender, put a 10 on the counter, much more than my Diet Coke was worth, and said, keep the change. And when the guy comes in and asks about the lady, just tell him she left with a rich guy in a suit. Can you do that? He winked at us and said, sure. I hope he gets the joke. We went to a neighborhood bar. It amused me that a Venus bar could neighbor a 4-star hotel. The bar at the Regency was perfect for private conversations, and we sat in a semi-closed booth. We ordered coffee. So, Felix, how is it that you find yourself in a place like the Venus Bar, alone, especially when it seems like you have something to celebrate? I realized she must find it strange. Well, it's kind of a tradition for me. When something goes wrong, I go and sit in the Venus Bar and people watch, and I soon realize that my life is so much better than most people out there, no matter what temporary grief I'm going through. I guess it's a kind of therapy. April looked puzzled. I thought you said you made a pact. I laughed mirthlessly. Well, I was on my way home at 4 o'clock this afternoon. intending to celebrate with my girlfriend and maybe even propose to her. At 4:30, I listened to her already celebrating with her ex-boyfriend. I explained what had happened and what led up to it. And then my phone rang. It was Sarah. "I'm sorry, April, but I should probably answer it. She's already tried several times." I took a deep breath and pressed the icon. I put my phone on speakerphone for some reason. I guess I wanted April to know that I wasn't making up what I told her. "Felix, thank God I caught you. It was just a prank. We didn't really do anything. If you'd come into the bedroom, you'd have seen it. I didn't know you'd react like that. Just come back and we'll explain everything." Suddenly, I felt completely calm. There was no more conflict inside me because I had made a decision. For starters, forget the we. Your fucking buddy better be gone by the time I get back. He's been living in my house rent-free for 2 weeks now without even thanking me, unless you count today. "But Felix." "And you'd better get yourself another place soon." "But Felix, you've got it all wrong. It was just a joke. An April Fool's joke." "Not really. Sarah, how about a little thought experiment? Try to imagine telling someone this story and convincing them you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, why don't you try it for real? Tell someone how you were in our bedroom with your ex-boyfriend, making all the noises that accompany passionate sex, but that it was all completely innocent." There was a slight pause this time. "Felix, it's not like that at all." April surprised me by picking up the phone and talking into it. "Hi, Sarah. We can start this experiment right away. I just heard your story and you certainly didn't convince me." Another pause on the other end of the wire. "Who are you?" April smirked. "I'm just a girl Felix picked up at a bar and asked me out for a drink. I guess you could say we both don't get the joke." At this point, I picked up my phone and disconnected. We looked at each other and laughed, and then April said, "You know, Felix, the funny thing is, I feel like she's telling the truth." She looked at me thoughtfully. "I know. I have the same feeling, but I'm sure it doesn't matter." It was clear she understood and agreed, and I was happy she didn't need to explain. "Okay, April. One good turn deserves another. You asked about the contract." She smiled and said, "Look, Felix, I don't want to take advantage of you. Please don't tell me something you shouldn't. Oh, don't worry about it. They've already agreed it can be made public and left it to me. Our company is not listed on the stock market, so there's no problem with stock price manipulation. I was going to wait until Monday to issue a press release, but there's nothing stopping it from being earlier, and the contract itself has to be in the public domain because of EU competition rules." She looked interested. "Give me your email address, April." She did, and I sent her a scan of the signed contract. "Why don't you call your editor and write a note?" Her eyes lit up. "Are you sure about this? I mean, it would really help me." "Of course it would. I'm not going anywhere. Can you dictate a note over the phone?" She nodded. "Then go ahead then." She called the editor. "Hey, Reg, it's April. You asked me to look into the Mendel's Garden deal." She put it on speakerphone. "Okay, do you have anything?" "Yes, I can confirm that the contract was signed today, for 3.2 million euros. I think having years of experience meant he was careful. Sounds like fun, April, but do you have any proof? Maybe someone's just playing games here." "No, I have an impeccable source. I just sent you a scan of the contract." A very brief pause followed. Then it came back, and his voice sounded a little concerned. "Well, it looks authentic, but how did you get it? I mean, there could be legal problems." At this point, I picked up the phone. "Hi, Reg, this is Felix Schrodinger, owner of Mendel's Garden. We'll send my selfies with April in a minute to prove I'm not an imposter and everything's okay. I was going to wait until Monday to break the news, but we met by chance and April talked me into giving her the details. We asked the waiter to take a picture of us at the table, and we sent the photo to her editor. She then dictated her story over the phone, which took surprisingly little time and impressed me with how she was able to organize her thoughts and construct a coherent article without pen and paper. Intelligence can be very sexy." As she finished, she laughed and said, "Well, things are definitely looking up. I'm feeling much better." Just at that moment, her phone rang. Dan's name appeared on the screen. Shit, I guessed it was her boyfriend. After hesitating a bit, she picked up the phone and put it on speakerphone as well. Cell phone rings. "Yeah? Hey, babe, where are you?" At the bar, having a drink like you suggested. Okay, tell me where it is and I'll come and get you. No, you won't. What do you mean, baby? Are you mad at me? It was just a joke. Oh, I'm not mad. Anymore. I'm having a great time with Felix. Who's Felix? Oh, I realize you're just messing with me. No, Dan. Felix is a lovely man who took me to a much nicer bar and bought me a drink. And now my birthday is starting to feel good. Wow. So it was her birthday. He did this to her on her birthday? April 1st? Her parents named her April, and I thought I was the one who had it bad. Hey, babe, I realize maybe I went too far this time. Just tell me where you are. His voice was starting to sound a little whiny. I picked up the phone. Hey, Dan, it's Felix. We're probably about to eat something and celebrate April's birthday in style. Don't wait up. I wondered if I'd gone too far and almost expected April to intervene, but she was clearly pleased. Hey, April, enough. You've had your fun already. Now she took my phone away from me. What's the matter, Dan? Can't you take a joke? I'll see you later. Or maybe in the morning. She ended the call, and then she did something complicated with her phone. What are you doing? Blocking his number. I can't turn my phone off yet because of work. They might need something. When I mentioned taking her out to a holiday dinner, I didn't think much of it, but she took me seriously, and I decided I was more than happy with the idea. It took me 2 minutes to get a reservation at the nearest reputable French restaurant. Now she was obviously a little concerned. Look, Felix, I feel a little awkward about this, and it might be awkward for you to invite a journalist to dinner, so I understand if... I laughed. How about I just invite April, a smart and interesting woman I'd like to get to know better, to dinner, and in the interest of full disclosure, she's also quite attractive and dressed incredibly sexy, and if you're not happy with that, I'd understand if... Now she laughed. In that case, I'd love to go to lunch with someone who knows how to be smart and sensitive without being a wuss. And in the interest of full disclosure, he is also a cliché, tall, dark-haired, and handsome stranger, and he looks very good in a suit. So lead on. As I entered the restaurant with April under my arm, I couldn't help but notice that many men's attention immediately focused on her. It might have been a more posh clientele, but the reality was little different from the scruffy guys at the Venus bar. The food was great, even if the waiter was a little pretentious, but it didn't matter as we both felt the same way. We were seated at 7 and suddenly it was 10. We talked so casually and laughed so freely, and then it became clear that while they were patient, but they needed a table. Our hands made involuntary contact more than once during the evening, and more often I caught myself looking into her beautiful blue-green eyes and physically reacting to the way she modestly lowered her eyes and then raised them again and even bit her lower lip once or twice, which I was sure was not intentionally seductive, but all the more arousing because it was unconscious. April's facial expression suddenly turned serious, and she said, I had such a wonderful evening. It's the best birthday I've ever had. And I have to admit that the thought of going back to the apartment and seeing Dan is really depressing. I felt the same way. I knew I'd have to deal with Sarah if she was still there, but the thought of that confrontation was guaranteed to ruin the memories of the evening. Okay, so what if I book us a couple rooms at the Regency? That way we can sleep here and deal with all the crap in the morning. I hoped that by emphasizing the two-room aspect, she would realize that I wasn't trying to force myself on her. We had just left the restaurant when she suddenly stopped on the sidewalk and pulled me to her. Looking into my eyes, she said, You're not going to stay with Sarah, are you? I didn't even have to think about it. God, no. Good. And I was done with Dan. I wondered where this was going, starting to feel the stirrings of something I couldn't yet identify, but which made me feel much more alive than I had in a long time. But Felix, you've already spent more than enough money. I wanted to object, but she continued, So let's save money and get just one room. I think my smile said it all. Then she put her arms around my neck and pulled me to her upturned face, saying, And I think it's time for me to get the birthday kiss I've been dreaming about all night. Since the invention of the kiss, there have been 5 kisses that have been considered the most passionate, the purest. This one left them all behind. Neither of us had words for how we felt. We walked to the hotel in silence, my jacket thrown over her shoulders to protect her from the evening chill, and I wrapped my arms around her. At the hotel front desk, April didn't feel the need to keep distance between us, rather proudly showing with her body language that she was with me. I splashed out on a rather luxurious room. Why not? I had just signed a contract worth millions. At first, we just looked around like children in a fairy tale. Then I turned to April and said, "I know it's your birthday today, but can I unwrap my present?" Suddenly, a little embarrassed, she nodded. I took my time. First, I just took my jacket from her. Then I stepped back a bit to look at her in the exquisite dark green dress. The material looked and felt like silk. "You look so ravishing, so beautiful and so sexy. I can't believe this is happening." She smiled shyly, not knowing what to say, but clearly enjoying the compliment. I didn't speak up, but I thought Dan really screwed up. He would never find another woman who could match April. I then walked over to her and stood behind her. I let the dress fall to the floor at her feet. Perhaps it really was silk, as it behaved almost like a liquid rather than a fabric. "I really hope you like neck kisses, April, because I'm going to kiss you." I felt her flinch. "I love neck kisses, but I think you can kiss me anywhere." I kissed her neck, enjoying how soft and smooth and warm it felt under my lips. "April, everything you said tonight was so smart, so true, so funny, and completely fair in every way. So please don't ruin it now by saying something stupid. Your breasts are perfection itself, and by the time we're done, it might hurt a little bit." "Get out of your shoes, April." The truth was that I loved seeing her in stiletto heels and stockings, but her feet must be sore after an evening spent in them, and I wanted everything just for her pleasure. She did as I asked and stood before me in stockings, garters, and black lace panties. She clearly wasn't an expert at wearing such lingerie as she fastened the stockings over the panties, but strangely enough, I found it cute. Maybe it even meant that I was the only man who undressed her while she wore stockings. When I was younger, I'm sure I wouldn't have managed it without messing it up. But I took my time, and soon she was standing there in just stockings and a garter belt. I had never seen a sexier sight in my life. Now April spoke. "Felix, I don't think I can undress you quickly, and I desperately need you. Please get undressed as soon as possible. I need you." She didn't have to ask me twice. For a while, we just lay next to each other, too exhausted to do anything more than give each other tender caresses while looking into each other's eyes. We were going to shower, but we ended up falling asleep, sweaty and smelling strongly of sex. I barely had the strength to pull the blanket over us and turn off the nightlights. In the morning, we showered. We had sex in the shower. Then I asked for breakfast to be brought to the room, and we spent a decadent time feeding each other in bed, which turned out to be pretty messy, and my conscience made me leave a big tip for the cleaners. When she turned on her phone, she had several messages from her editor. Her scoop had made the front page and been printed under her name, and she had been given a permanent position. The last message made us both laugh. It was from Reg asking if she could talk me into an interview. We then split off in different directions to attend to the less pleasant business that awaited us, but already happy in the knowledge that we would see each other in the evening to celebrate April's promotion. I got home at 11:30 that morning. I wondered if I would have to physically evict Mark, but as it turned out, he was gone. I walked in and found Sarah sitting at the dining room table in the living room sipping coffee. She didn't look too good, and it occurred to me that despite making love to April for so long, I may have slept more than she did. "Thank God you're here, Felix. Now we can work things out." I went and poured myself some coffee. At that moment, it dawned on me that I couldn't remember her ever making or pouring coffee for me. I walked over and sat down at the table, settling in at the opposite end. "Where were you last night, Felix?" It amused me that she somehow felt entitled to ask me questions. Nevertheless, I indulged her. "I stayed in a hotel." "Alone?" "No, I spent the night with April. Just saying her name gave me a warm feeling, but apparently it didn't affect Sarah the same way." "How could you do that, Felix? What about us?" I tilted my head slightly to the side, as if examining a particularly exotic bug. "Sarah, I think the we ended yesterday, or rather a little after 4 o'clock. She looked at me disappointedly. "But I told you, Felix, it was just a prank. If you had opened the door—" She really didn't understand. "Sarah, you know the whole Schrodinger's cat thing?" She looked at me, not understanding what was going on. "Yes. Of course you explained it all to me, how you opened the box to see if the cat is alive or dead, but I don't see what that has to do with the case. Among other things, you didn't open the door. Too bad you didn't do it then. I stopped her. No, that's the point. I didn't have to open the door. I could see she still didn't understand. If I had opened the door, I might have seen you both naked on our bed. Her frustration showed again. But I told you, Felix, you couldn't have seen it because it didn't happen. If you ask your secretary, Gail, she'll tell you how I asked her to let me know when you were heading home. I wouldn't do that if it was real. I went on as if she hadn't said anything. Or the other possibility was that I would have climbed those stairs, agonizing over those sounds, thrown up at the top in disgust, and opened the door only to see the two of you, fully clothed, far apart, laughing at me and saying, "April Fool's Day." Finally, she stopped talking. You see, Sarah, I didn't open the door because I didn't need to. Either way, our relationship was dead. Epilogue, April 1st. 4 years later. Jade Mountain Resort, St. Lucia. I've just watched April emerge from the infinity pool, silhouetted against the sunset. She's expecting our first child, and the bump is just starting to show. We've gotten into the habit of leaving at the end of March and returning in early April without telling anyone where we're going. I am too young to retire, even though I can easily afford it. Now I only work when I want to, and I look forward to being as involved as possible in raising our children. I recently learned from a friend at the time that I was probably the only person who believed Sarah when she said she hadn't slept with Mark. Even her own mother didn't believe her. I guess you could say it was a joke on her, but I don't think it was funny to her.